Hi, good afternoon, Aishwarya, Ashin. Good to see you.
Hey, hi Charlene. Give me just 5 to be on video.
No worries, whenever you're ready. We have 1 more minute before 2:30. We'll wait for a while. On the dot, I'm not so sure how many people are still coming in. Let's start here. Right, I would love this to be as interactive as possible. If you are able to on the camera, that would be great. And just let me know if you are seeing the screen share as well. Okay, more people coming in. Good to see you, Venkat. Okay, can I check my volume? Is this okay? Just give me a thumbs up or nod your head if this is fine.
Yeah, your volume is okay.
Okay, because I've been trying to check in on that. Some reason it's not working well on this today. Okay, great. Good to see everyone here. And today we are on the core competency number 4. And if you have first time seeing me here, my name is Charlene and I am from Singapore. I'm currently on the level 3 journey, also together with Aishwarya here, right? So I would like to share some of the experiences for this core competency number 4, cultivates trust and safety. Okay, I'll be using slides and to guide for the discussions here, but I would love to see participations from the crowd here because we have really a small room. So the more that we participate, the more that we can actually pick up certain 1 or 2 skills with regards to this core competency here that we are unpacking here today, okay? So let's have a quick look in terms of what is inside this particular core competency here. As I am looking at the definition itself, again, again and again, right? So I had a different realizations when I looked at the definition as I was preparing the slide. So I've been coaching for many years as well, since 2018. So when we talk about the partnership with a client to create a safe, supportive environment that allows the client to share freely. And this is maintaining as a relationship of mutual respect and trust. We all know that trust is a huge way of being, right? Being in a coaching space. So maybe if you unmute yourself, what does cultivate trust and safety means to you? Anyone at all? Or you can unmute yourself and speak up, or you would like to type in the chat, that's fine too. What does cultivate trust and safety means to you?
I think for me, cultivating trust and safety is really revolving around the psychological safety bit, where I could feel held and, seen and heard by my coach or in this relationship by my coach. So that really is what means, what it means for me when it comes to trust and safety.
Mm, mm. Thank you for sharing that, Aishwarya. Anyone else would like to contribute here? What does cultivate trust and safety means to you? Feel free to type in the chat as we go along as well. And what does it really mean, as I am actually relooking at the definition, like I say earlier on, is there is this definition itself, right? It is not just a checklist. And if I find that myself is asking myself, is the client trusting me in this conversation? It is actually becoming a checklist, not showing up in the psychological safe haven in the real time, right? As Swara mentioned, it's a psychological safety. It's something that is not just a checklist to ask yourself whether, hey, am I, giving that space, that safe space? Yeah, we always talk about safe space. What does it feels like, right? And how would you reflect your past coaching session that has this element of safety? Okay. So the real question here is also true for coaches. As we are coaching, we can also ask ourselves, can I be vulnerable here as well? Can I actually trust my client that they are able and capable to do the way that they're doing things? Yeah. So the primary skill here is talking about saying yes to the vulnerability. And that is the primary coaching skills that we're going to deep dive a little bit here. As a coach, what might be a good way that we can reflect with regards to this core competency here? I'll be showing slides that has a little bit of definitions and then a how-to and some tips. But I would like to focus a little bit more on the reflection questions here today, which I feel sometimes as we are coaching, we forgot to do the reflections and we forgot to see what might be working well. And sometimes I've seen coaches fall into the space of like asking me questions like, Charlene, I do not know whether the client actually get an impact. I say, ask them and ask yourself. Yeah. So trust and safety. Let's take a look at each and every bullet points in the bullet point number 4. This is 4.01. When we come into talking about client context, and there's this little story I would like to share here. I coach a variety of clients, but there are certain type of client that makes me feel very jittery. And I will go like, oh man, this kind of people again, right? And I tell you what is the type of people. It's not stereotyping. It is just my reaction, right? When I actually coach Caucasian women, blonde hair, white skin, and speak like UK accents or American accents, any Caucasian white woman, I will feel a little bit jittery. And I do have clients in this group of ethnicity. Majority of them comes from the cultural differences, and that actually makes me feel tense. And I didn't realize that until very recent month. There are 2 Caucasian women that I needed a coach, and that got me into the space of like, okay, I need to see that, make them see themselves. I need to see myself as well. So when we say that understanding a client context, that may include where they come from, who they are, and, and sometimes we may make judgment around that. So the reflection question here is like, am I approaching this type of client as the type to be categorized or is it something to explore? Yeah. For me, that Caucasian white woman has I do not know what kind of effect that actually was with me, but when I realized that it's a part of me feel um not on par with them for some reason. So that actually made me feel small as a coach. And that is not going to help my client to get into what they need. So as I'm reflecting on this, I am categorizing people. I am actually putting them into certain boxes that is actually very, very, the client will feel very different. When I started to realize that and I reframed the thinking process goes like, okay, this is a person and this is a person, right? That I'm coaching rather than saying, oh, this is where you come from, this is what you do, this is your career, and etc. Right? A person is a person. It is not a label. Yeah. When we are trying to understand a client context, I would like to urge that, hey, is my curiosity genuine? Or it's just like, oh, I'm boxing myself and categorizing my client into certain buckets based on what we feel that the client could be thinking. Sometimes we may not be understanding fully because of the cultural differences. It is okay to actually voice it out in a session as well. Sometimes when I see the types of culture that I'm not familiar with, I will mention, for example, things like, I'm Asian Chinese woman, and my perspective may come very different from yours, but I would appreciate if we can actually share a little bit learning experiences here with regards to what do you mean by certain words, what do you mean by certain action that actually put things on the table, that actually helps the client to explain that context for the coach to learn, right? Coach learning journey is also part of the process. It's in other core competency, but I would like to link that a little bit here, okay? If you guys have any questions, please feel free to unmute and then raise up a hand and or type in the chat. I will try to address questions. Okay. And on the second competency, as I'm sharing this, oops, hang on, this is in the way. Okay.
Charlene, I had a
Yes,
question here.
go on.
Uh, so how do you come about, bringing this awareness for yourself that in that moment there is, possibly some kind of assumption that you're holding about your
Yes.
Caucasian
Yep.
client or any other client for
Yep.
that matter who brings in jitters. How do you come about building that awareness for your own self?
For that, because I wasn't aware until there was a recent session with a Caucasian woman. And I feel like, oh my God, it's a white woman. And then when I caught that thought in my head, I go like, okay, I'm not feeling comfortable here. And then I just says that, I come from a different parts of the world than yours, that some of my context that I'm sharing here may not be exactly feels familiar. Same thing for me towards you too. So I bring it up on the table. So when I was catching that thoughts of like, oh my God, the Caucasian white woman. I was like thinking, where did that come from? So that's when I started to realize, oh, okay, I hasn't been feeling comfortable for many years when I see a Caucasian white woman. For some reason, I don't know why, but right now the awareness is like I cannot unseen it anymore. So whenever I caught myself thinking that, oh my God, this kind of client again, I go like, okay, what about this client that I'm feeling so uncomfortable with? In an instant clarification with myself, in the second bullet point, is my curiosity genuine? Or am I having my own hypothesis here about someone? All right, you know what I mean? So when the hypothesis start to come up, this is question number 2 here in the reflection questions for coaches. And I ask myself, what is in me right now that I need to address? And sometimes saying it out in front of people makes it feel very normalized, actually. Okay, so this is how I counter that. I will figure out the reasons, my thing with this type of client later in outside the session, right? This is also my own personal development journey too. Does it answer your question, Iswara?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay.
It's beautiful how you said that, yeah. Am I, is my curiosity genuine or is it a tool to confirm my own hypothesis? And
Yeah.
I think that's a good question to ask oneself during a coaching session.
Yes, and you can have this at the back of your mind, or if you're online and then put it at the side, it will be helpful, right, for the tips itself. Okay, so let's move on. Thank you for a great question. I hope everyone is learning. Please feel free to type in the chat, guys, for those who just came in. 4.02. When we demonstrate the set of respect itself, I move on this quite a fair bit in the past in terms of how can I actually build trust with a set of identity and the perceptions that people bring it into the sessions that it's like out of my league that I don't understand, or maybe in a space that I first time having a certain type of coaching conversations. Because in any sense, we will have certain sets of judgment. And the sets of judgment, sometimes when I hear some of the coaches that they come to ask me for mentoring and ask questions, and they go like, this is not what I learned in my coaching school, Charlene. And I go, okay, so how is this actually um, preventing you from respecting the client's identity, perceptions, and also style and languages that actually the client bring into the space? There's a lot of fixations that may be around with regards to respect. that I will only respect people of certain sort, right? That maybe appear in our space. And sometimes when we need to adapt to the client's language, the way that they speak certain things that we may not be understand, are we assuming things? Are we assuming things? Or we're asking a question to clarify, what do you mean by that thing that you just said, that word that you just used? Right? And sometimes one of the key things that I love to use is I say, I don't want to generalize things, right? Other people may have their own sets of perceptions about certain keywords that people use, but what is your version? I love to ask that question to my client. And that got them to think about only themselves. That brings out a lot of their perceptions and identity that possibly could be a coaching conversation after all. Okay. And I definitely don't encourage to fit the client with your own words. Ask yourself, if the words that they are using, why are you changing it? Right? Example. I can't think of a concrete example right now, but what I can think of is a lot of coaches, they come to tell me that, yeah, my coaching school or my mentor always tell me that you can use this word, and they're trying to fit into their word, but it doesn't sound very natural. Okay, right. So any questions on this one? Okay, cool. Let's move on. I would like to open up for conversations a little bit, right, towards the midpoint, because there's something interesting I wanted to show. 4.3. This is also some personal story that I would like to share here is when I learned about respecting the client's unique talent, sometimes it gives me a lot of focusing on the improvement itself. Some in the past, I always focus on what is the improvement list rather than focusing on what has been working well so far with the client. And this is a very conscious strategy change in the way that I coach. I think on my 5th year or 6 years mark, and I realized that if I focus on the improvement list rather than focusing on what has been working well so far, I will lose that respect with the client. It felt as if I am actually nitpicking them and put them into a broken mode, which I actually didn't have the intention, but I didn't realize that there was a part of me that was so naturally look into what can be improved, what can be done better, can we do it this way, that way. As I am understanding that the client doesn't need to be fixed, it's just that they have not find the answer, that actually change the entire narratives. Because when we are trying to cultivate the potential, there's one of the second question here. Have I bought into the narrative that coaching is about solving problems rather than cultivating potential? Because sometimes as a coach, we might see that, oh, there's a big problem. But to the client, they go like, oh, it's a small thing. And sometimes we might not be aware that we are bringing our problem in that way into the coaching session, right? And sometimes when I'm focusing too much on the improvement list, it seems like I'm actually attacking the client weaknesses. Then to really ignite their wholesome as a person, and that's their resourceful. I find it pretty challenging to do a switch until a client story. Okay, I'll share with a client story that happened a couple of years ago. And she says that, oh, I have so much things to do, and then there's a lot of things I need to improve. And all these things add up into the stress moments. And I go like, hey, we're already very busy in life. So what has been working well so far? That that uh, um question was a hit to myself as well. What have I not been seeing in all my clients in terms of what has been working well so far? And it just come up with a lot of genuine kind of feelings for me. And the client goes like, oh, no one has asked me that questions before. And people has been always on the dot to solve problem, improving. Nobody stop and ask what has been working well. And that's why a lot of people feel really challenging in celebrating small wins. Okay. So when we ask the clients, hey, what has been working well so far? And it got them into the space of like thinking, what has been working well so far? In the session, they was trying to dig and dig and dig. That is when the rapport is actually building up. And in a way that we are using the questions to acknowledge the client has a strength. They know how to do, how to so-called live their life. Sometimes they just don't see it. And we just help them see it. Okay. I see a lot of reactions over here. Any questions so far on this particular competency? Okay. Let's move on. Is this has been
I
useful so
think,
far? Yeah.
sorry,
Yes,
I was saying that there's this book called as Locating the Energy for Change,
yeah.
and it talks about positive inquiry and how, you could just inquire into what really energizes you,
Mm,
what,
mm,
like you said, what's really working for you at this moment, and,
mm.
what's the motivation around all of this. So just positive questioning can bring about so much changes rather than, going into all the things that needs to be fixed per se.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So sometimes when we find our mind getting too narrow, and the more you ask, the more the client stays stagnant, you know that your question line doesn't work. Roll back, roll back, right? Good. Let's go back to the beginning of the conversation. What did we talk about just now? What is actually you are learning about yourself? We can loop back the questions as well and sieve out that particular learning. I just had a coaching session this morning and just reminded me about this client. As I find myself into the mode of telling because the client just doesn't get anything at all. And then the more I tell, and then she, at the end of the telling, and then she goes like, I don't understand what you're talking. And I go like, okay, don't tell, this is not working. Even though she doesn't understand, but let's go back to the original questions and let's restart from there. And we lead to somewhere else, right? So it's okay to retract, right? Yeah, it is okay to retract. And one of the clients also asked me that, is retracting something bad? And I go like, hey, how does baby walk? They walk and they fall down and they stand up, they walk again. So it's a fall down retract. They need to know to retract to move forward. And 1 month down the road, you know that the baby is running. Right? So this is a process itself that we have to also acknowledge that in order for the unique talents and insights and the work within the coaching process to come out, for us also to acknowledge a client's good work, this is very much necessary to reflect on our coaching style and also our own coaching way. What are we doing? Am I cultivating the trust and safety, or am I doing trust and safety here? Okay, so this is very interesting here. Okay, moving on. So 4x4, 4x5, I am actually clubbing them together. And this has to do with a lot of empathy conversations is happening around here. This particular two competencies over here, when we say show support, empathy, and concern for the client, and we also want to acknowledge and support the client's expressions of feelings, perceptions, concerns, beliefs, and suggestions. What happens if we don't know what they're talking about? Yeah. And then we go like very automatically, we say, I hear you, but ask yourself, do you really hear the client? Right? So this is one of the pitfall that I'm putting up here. And then we go like, oh, it must be hard. Right? We were being taught to say that sometimes. But do you mean it? I don't say I hear you most of the time. I use nodding. I use uh-huh. That kind of, I mean, for this is my style, right? And a lot of coaches, they do, I hear you. And I go like, doesn't feel like you're hearing. So, and some even interesting, they say, hey, let's look on the bright side, nothing big deal here. While the client is actually having a moment to really want to express the emotions. And sometimes when we are not able to express on certain emotions, sometimes this can be kind of like a jam break, right? In the coaching sessions. So how do we do that? Post the coaching sessions, I strongly recommend to take a look at these 4 questions at the bottom here for the coach's reflections, right? Ask yourself, what may be the emotion experience that makes you feel uncomfortable? It's a reverse to the first questions. Or if you want to answer the first question, so am I trying to manage a client emotion experience to keep myself comfortable? What is uncomfortable about a client that I was feeling just now that I can actually do something about it after the coaching session? And sometimes when emotion comes up and a client goes like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I need to like take a moment. I feel so emotional. A lot of things coming out, flooding, crying, right? And or anger start to come out. And as coaches, do you see this emotion as an obstacle to the client or this part of the essential gateway to the truth? What is a client needed to see with a lot of compassion around it, right? I will use the word compassion for these two competency here. Sometimes the truth can be very jarring and the truth can be very painful. How can we as a coach learning how to use the words to help the client to see the truth with compassion, right? We always want to speak the truth with compassion. Truth doesn't need to be very jarring or painful. Depends on how we articulate and what kind of way of being that we bring into the session. That is also part of the cultivating the trust and safety, yeah. Right? We are not doing the trust and safety. What is your way of being? Yeah. And that also shows up in your own relationship with vulnerability. And when the client shows up in fear, doubt, with the other wide range of emotions that you might not understand, right? I mentioned that. Am I uncomfortable? Okay. Any questions so far on this one? Okay, if not, then we'll move on. Please feel free to type in the chat if you have any questions. I can hope to answer that. I'll leave a bit of time to the back later on for some Q&A. 4.6, I think this is the last one of the 4 parts of the 6 parts of this cultivating trust and safety. When there is actually a line between building connections and seeking validations. Sometimes we want to be sure that we are doing a good job with the client. And sometimes we are not sure. Sometimes different clients have different level of impact. And you start to compare, that client has a huge thing, but this client has nothing. Am I doing a good job? So a lot of, I would say, doubt can creep into the coaches, ourselves. And if we are going to be demonstrating openness and transparency as a way to display vulnerability, and that shows a lot in the journey that we are journeying with the client. Okay, why I say so is because sometimes when we are unable to find the validation, we feel jittery and we feel like, oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I'm actually not doing it great, right? How much you want to be able to open up this part of you and share with the client and ask a question, for example. Has this session been useful for you? What have you been learning about yourself? What is in our discussion that has been the most useful? And what might be the part of the today's session that you take is your key takeaway, right? So this is also the way that we want to demonstrate the openness and transparency, because part of it is for the client and for me, myself, part of it is for me, myself, to ask a question, to be able to build the connections with the client and for me to find a way to measure my own success KPI. Okay. And with the intention at the back, but not just us seeking out the transparency for ourselves, the question does transmit that I'm just serving with transparency here, that the client needs a safety, and I also have my own need being in the session, right? Sometimes some of the coaches, their own needs is always asking, am I being liked by the client? Does the client like me? Does the client okay with my kind of questioning, right? For me, sometimes I'm looking if the client is able to relate with me or not. So that's my so-called the KPI at the back of my head. I don't measure it in the very hard way, but it's always through the questions I get a sense of groundedness that, okay, the client is doing well at their level, at their impact level that they want to receive, right? And sometimes I do use some personal stories to help the client, instead of inserting myself into the client's world and then becoming my own therapy in the session, which is generally no. Okay. Right. So openness and transparency does help to cultivate that trust and safety in the relationship. And the questions that Aishwarya asked earlier on just now, regards to how do I actually come to be aware about it? I'm like, okay, I'm aware about certain things and I just being open that I'm coming from a different culture, that my perceptions may be different. So this is a way that I open up myself in the session. But one of the way that was also one of my favorite is I do my own reflection based on a story that I tell my client. And this is also a way that I demonstrate the openness and transparency so that the client got an idea in terms of how do they build their own self-awareness, right? Being able to be vulnerable and share parts of your story and your journey in the session sometimes does help the client to pick it up. Oh, okay, I can try the same way to reflect on my own stories. Does it make sense to everyone here? Okay, great. Any questions so far up to this point? Has this been useful? For those who are not in the camera, if you would like to give me some reaction, it'll be great. A thumbs up or heart shake or type something in the chat, it'll be great. Great. Thank you, Shraddha. Okay. This is something interesting on top of the 6 bullet points, right, as listed in the ICF core competency. I call it the performance versus the presence. When we are treating the Cultivates Trust and Safety as a technique to perform itself, right, rather than being a state to be embodying, this really, really got down into the space of like, hey, I'm taking out a checkbox. I'm having a checklist here. Did I do this? Did I do that? Am I open with the client? Am I trusting them, right? In the session, if you found yourself having a checklist at the back of your mind, and especially for those who are trying to pass the PCC marker exams, right? For your recording, I would suggest you to throw away all the checklists and learn how to be present and see how yourself is performing only after the coaching session, which you do a coaching reflection. That's when you see your performance, not in the session, because it will bring in a lot of unstable kind of space to the client because you're bringing yourself in, okay? Because we're serving the client, this is the client's work, and I feel that there is a need for us to be really mindful about this. What comes to your thought when I'm actually mentioning this as part of the Cultivates the Trust and Safety? Type in the chat if you can.
So, one of the things that comes to my mind when I think of performance versus presence is Charlene as, as a growing up process. And I see my son also, who's a 9-year-old right now. Performance has been a very important part of anything and everything that we do, whether it is school academic performance or whether it is, performing at a sport, or tomorrow he has his annual day and performing in the dance. Um, I don't think as a culture we've been able to uh, let people enjoy what they do than to perform in the particular role or task or
Yeah,
whatever that is
yeah,
being given.
yeah, yeah.
So when we have been, ingrained or we've been conditioned with something like that, socially constructed to believe that, performance is above everything else, enjoyment, etc., etc. It is really hard when we enter a role like a coach, a brand new role for a lot of us, and to say that, oh, we'll not perform here.
Absolutely. I understand where you're trying to come from, and totally I'm feeling the similar I was experienced with my kids as well. And in the world that we always need to perform, I do have a KPI as a coach, right? Like I say, my own KPI, how I measure myself as a coach, am I performing well? But if we are in the session or in the moment, let's say your son's situation is in the dance performance, am I performing or am I being present with my dance itself, right? So that has to do with what are you bringing into the session, right? I call session a little bit loosely here, is because right into a dance performance is a session, into doing homework is a session,
Yeah,
into like cooking is a session, into driving from point A to point B is a session,
yeah,
right? I use it in
yeah,
that way. And the coaching session is a session. In those session boundary, what are you showing up as? What are you bringing into it? If we are going to constantly bring in the checklist, it's really very tiring.
yeah,
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 I do this, yeah, I
absolutely.
do
And
that, da, da,
I
da.
completely agree to you. And
Yeah,
I buy this whole,
yeah.
the
The
idea
concept.
of
Mm,
being present and in the here and now, in whatever
mm,
session that you're in.
mm,
And I also see that there is so much social construct around it. There is so much of conditioning around it that it will probably take us some more time to like really get into the groove of
yeah.
being completely present, enjoying the moment, fully, holding ourselves and the client as a container and not really wanting to do something about it or
Mm,
not fixing, not solutioning, not getting into an action. So
mm.
many things that come along with performance.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree in that. Let me share with you one of my conversation with my kid recently as well. Same thing, right? Going into competition and so stressed, did I do this, did I not do this? And I come out and crying because losing. And the attitude, it's mm, I wouldn't say that it's not as expected. I don't find him enjoying the competition. So I asked him this question. Why do you want to join the competition? I want to win. I want to get a trophy. Okay. What does a trophy mean to you? Why do you want a trophy? I want to put it in my room for collections of trophies. Okay, cool. You want a collections of trophy. How do you find that? Why, I mean, why do you what does it make you lose in this particular rounds? And they go like, oh, he started to look at the things that's not working well. I say, okay, what about things that's working well? So I asked him the same thing, but it's at the kids level. So I think the question that I used was, what makes you feel happy being in the competition, right? So then he started to relate. Oh, I'm so stressed being in the competition.
Yeah,
I just want a trophy. I'm not enjoying the game. And I'm like,
yeah,
okay, there you go. So how do you want to enjoy the game, right? So that actually becoming a learning lesson. That is also a vulnerability as a mom or as a coach that we can bring in the conversation with the client as well. If the client tells you things like, I'm not enjoying the competition, yada yada, I'm not enjoying my presentation with my boss and this and that. And then you go like, okay, what worked well? We spend so much time so hard to actually do the work and then my boss still are not appreciating me. Okay, so what did not work well? What is part of you that doesn't contribute to the results that you want to get? And then they go like, oh, okay, I'm not able to articulate well. My presentation needed a little bit more data. I got no time. I'm so tired and yada, yada. Okay, there we go. We have something to work on, right? Your presentation energy needs to come up. Yeah. Does it make sense to you, Aishwarya?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. In fact, yesterday, so my son has an annual day performance tomorrow, and he was
Mm,
saying, "Oh my God, I was so worried at the practice today because everybody was watching us, and I thought I would goof up, and I was scared, and so on and so forth." And I said, "Oh, why don't you teach me, what your dance is all about?" And then we started dancing together.
mm, mm,
And he had laughs and he had fun. And then he was looking at me making mistakes and he was rolling with laughter and stuff like that. I said, "What happened to you? What happened over here? What changed?" And he said that, "I'm having fun with you." I said, "Can you take this back to your
yeah,
performance and like, have fun there instead
yeah,
of worrying about, what goes wrong?"
yeah,
Because no matter what, I think all of us over there are really looking forward to seeing you dance and we're going to have fun. So he said, "Yeah, mom, I think this is more easier." And so I think that's where, the whole performance versus presence really came up like a light bulb
Yeah,
in my mind saying, okay, I think we are really conditioned as children to like
we are.
constantly,
Yes, yes, we are. You know, there's ranking in the school, right? There's like
yeah,
points, there's exam, and we're being conditioned. And ended up, um, people are being conditioned in a way that it's there's a structured path towards certain things. What
yeah,
about if there is an unstructured path? What does it look like? Right?
mm,
It may be slow, it may be very unconventional, it may be looks very different path than some other people. But as an adult, we live a different life. What
yeah,
are you? How are you being brave enough to choose with a client, with your presence, to support them in choosing what they want in life? Sometimes it is very obvious to the coach that, oh, you like this job, oh, you don't like this kind of job, right? But the coach,
mm,
the client goes like, but I love this, but that's when the resistance start to come in. And when you hear the resistance, happens this morning, one of the client, the resistance come in every single sentence. I say, let's allow herself to dream a little bit, right? And she love arts, and then she's in the finance, very structural work, and then arts is very creative work, right? And she wants to get into the arts related kind of career. And I say, let's put the structural side aside, bring in your creativity that you love when you do your painting, and allow yourself to find that liberations. That was the words that she used. I found my liberation after the session. Yeah. So that actually got me to realize that a lot of people are trapping in the performance stage. I needed to perform. I needed to look like traditional people. Everyone goes through the same path. I am afraid to be different. In fact, we're all different, right? The Caucasian woman story I was sharing just now, we are different. But I'm
yeah,
bringing it up first so that I don't feel awkward in the coaching session. That will help the client to be able to feel safe enough, right? We're talking about safety and trust and safety. Makes the client feel safe enough with the presence, not on your checklist. Yeah, it's just like how you decided to dance with your kid, and then makes him realize that, hey, this is much easier, right? It doesn't matter if I do a different step or step wrongly. I'm having fun here. Yeah. So thank you for bringing up that, because this is the core thing that I wanted to share, which I thought, hey, this is interesting. When we are performing trust and safety, it becomes a checklist. Your presence is totally off. For new coaches, if you find it a little bit challenging here to understand this, check in with yourself, right? Am I managing a client? Am I not meeting the client in the way that they wish to? Right? So this is becoming a coaching question itself. Coaching reflection questions post session for yourself. It is important to reflect post coaching session so that we are able to see our performance KPI. Right? We still need to perform as a coach, that we have different skills that we are learning here, and also being truthful to ourselves is also part of our learning journey that we can bring into the session with the client. The more you reflect, the more that you figure out, hey, there are still more work to be done. Okay? Okay, cool. Last one. If we were to take a look at the genesis of the entire coaching core competency here for the Cultivates Trust and Safety, we don't really find the trust, right? We cultivate it with a lot of diligence. And when we cultivate it with diligence, and that's when, wanting to perform or being nice, it doesn't get in the way of you being a human and still a professional coach. Okay? Because essentially we are sharing and demonstrating with the client how to be in order to become. Okay? So I hope that this session is useful, and I hope that there are a lot of key takeaway here. Maybe let's share over here, either type in the chat one word or one sentence if you want to unmute. Share with me what is your key takeaway in today's core competency sharing session here. I'm not hear from Ashin and Venkat. Would you both like to share? Or Aishwarya, you want to share what is your key takeaway that you feel you can practice on this core competency moving forward?
Um, I think two of them. One is keeping a check on my own assumptions while I'm sitting with a client and really watching for whether I'm being curious or whether I'm, concluding and wanting to check on my conclusions. That's one big takeaway. And the other is the whole performance and presence and how do you, while holding parts of you that is conditioned, that is, automated to do things in a certain way versus the part of you that yearns to be happy present in the here and now
Mm.
uh, with your client. So holding both these polarities within oneself, I think that's the other piece that I'm looking forward to.
Very nice. I hope that you are able to cultivate that I would say practice moving forward to actually get better at the coaching. Thanks
Yeah,
for sharing,
absolutely.
Aishwarya.
Thank you.
Yeah. Nice having you guys here. So with this, if there's no more questions or no more sharing, Ashin, are you still there? Would you like to share one or two key takeaway if you are able to unmute? Okay, cool. Right. I think without holding up everyone's time here, I will end this session and thank you for coming. I will see you in the next one. I think tonight Aishwarya has her session
6 o'clock,
this
I
evening.
have mine.
Yes,
See
please
you in
feel
the
free.
evening.
Yes, I'll see you then. There.
Bye bye.
Bye.